Hi, I'm Jami Shapiro, and welcome to Grandma Has ADHD. I'm a certified senior move manager and owner of Silver Linings Transitions, where I help people navigate life's big transitions. But here's the thing, I spent years helping families move through change while completely missing the pattern that was running through my own life. I am the daughter of two ADHD parents, the mother of three ADHD children, and yep, I have ADHD too. For years, I didn't have the language or understanding for what that meant. But becoming an ADHD coach and specialist, that's been absolutely game changing. Not just for how I work with my clients, but for how I relate to my family and honestly, for how I understand myself. I even wrote a book about it called This Explains So Much. This podcast is for all of us who are discovering ADHD later in life. Each week, I bring you conversations with industry experts and people sharing their own ADHD journeys, real stories, real strategies, and often a little too much information. If you're loving what you're hearing, please share this podcast, leave us a review, and find me at jamishapiro.me. That's JamiShapiro.me. Whether you're over 50 and just getting diagnosed, or you're recognizing patterns you've lived with your whole life, this is your space to navigate ADHD with others who get it. So grab your coffee and get comfortable and let's dive in. The doors to the Sparkler Society are officially open, and we've made some changes based on everything we learned in our first month of testing. You guys gave us such great feedback, and we listened. Here's what's new. Instead of trying to do all the things at once, which, let's be honest, is very on brand for our ADHD brains and also kind of exhausting, we're starting where it matters most. We're going deep on overspending, impulse purchases, and the habits that quietly drain our time, energy, and money. You know the ones, the subscriptions you forgot about, the Amazon cart at midnight, the stuff that just appears in your house. We're calling it the ADHD tax, and for most of us, it's costing us hundreds of dollars a month we don't even realize we're losing. To celebrate our real launch, we're offering half-off membership. That's just $50 a month for your entire first year for the first 50 people who join. And here's the part I really love. We offer a money-back guarantee if you don't save enough to cover the cost of membership. We're that confident. You can find more information by going to jamishapiro.me. That's JamiShapiro.me. Oh, and one more thing. For everyone who keeps telling me they don't like to read, This Explains So Much is now available as an audiobook. You're welcome. You can find links to the show notes or on the Jami Shapiro website. Now let's do this. My guest today is someone who has built an entire movement around one radical idea, that real people who don't love cleaning and organizing, deserve real solutions. Dana K. White is the creator of the No Mess Decluttering Process, a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, speaker, podcaster, YouTuber, and self-described and hard-earned decluttering expert. Her blog, A Slob Comes Clean, started back in 2009 when she began blogging anonymously as Noni, short for anonymous, just trying to get her own chaotic home under control. She had no idea that millions of people would see themselves in her story. She is the author of multiple books, including Decluttering at the Speed of Life, How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind, and Organizing for the Rest of Us. She also trains and certifies decluttering coaches in her unique process. Dana's whole approach is grounded in honesty, humor, and the kind of hope that only comes from someone who has truly been there. And I think you are going to love this conversation. Dana, welcome to the Grandma Has ADHD podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I think you have the best podcast name ever.
Thank you. I think it's pretty good. I'm gonna take
amazing.
it.
It's amazing.
So I have To start, first of all, I want to disclose to the audience that I have known who Dana Kate White was, and I am a senior move manager, and I do a lot of presentations on downsizing. Do you own your stuff? Does your stuff own you? And I have actually mentioned Dana Kate White in my presentations, and I'm familiar with her work, but I had the honor to hear her speak at the Neurodivergent Conference in 2026, and she was such a real human being. But I also have to, in full disclosure, tell you that after I met her and heard her speak, and then saw her bio, and then connected with the imposter syndrome, because I imagine, Dana K. White, that you might have a little of that, you might be among those of us who have ADHD or suspect strongly that you have ADHD. What do you think?
So it's a whole conversation, right? Like I get diagnosed by people on the internet at least weekly, and it doesn't bother me at all. It does bother me a little bit when people then become very angry because I won't get officially diagnosed, and I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. I'm sure that it's something very personal to them, but I we met at the neurodivergent
Mm-hmm.
conference.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that even though I've pretty much gone, okay, I could probably be diagnosed if I wanted to. I did sit in a few sessions and thought, wow, this is absolutely for sure me when they were describing ADHD. So I've always been the messy person. I've always been when somebody describes ADHD as the notebook in school that's completely crammed with papers, that was me. But I was also very successful in school, which I think sometimes kind of irritated some of my teachers, right? Because they would say things like, you've got to have an organized notebook to be successful. And then here was Dana, who was salutatory and you know,
Mm-hmm.
proved them wrong, basically, that my locker and my all that stuff. But I was able to get things done. And I as an educator, so that is my background, as education.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it comes down to, does it affect your learning, right? Like in that situation. And it did not affect my learning in school, but it definitely affected my life, specifically once I got to the point where I thought, okay, whatever reasons I thought I was messy before, now I'm tired of that and I want to get it figured out, and I couldn't figure it out. That is when I think that I really understood how much I was affected by my brain working differently. Does that make sense?
100%. It absolutely makes sense. And I don't, and there's a lot of, I don't know if you are familiar with Penn and Kim Holderness at all. Penn
Yeah,
was,
yes, I've
yes.
seen,
So,
yes.
and he's been very out about his ADHD, and
Mhm.
he's an amazing performer. He was actually the keynote speaker at the ADHD conference in 2024. And his wife, who co-wrote the book with him, was supporting what it was like to be married to someone with ADHD, have an
Mhm.
ADHD child. Well, at 49, she just got diagnosed.
Yeah.
And it was not caught because that perfectionist thing that you're talking about. So a little girl who looks like she's got it all together, who does perform very well, is type A and driven, isn't going to go to the principal's office because there's no issue going on. And so I think that that's been a lot of the misconception behind it. And I will
Mhm.
say that I think that probably the reason, which is a compliment to you, that people want you to go and get diagnosed, is that you are this rock star. You've figured it out. And there is, unfortunately, a lot of stigma around
Yeah.
ADHD right now. And so it might be more of just admit that you're one of us,
Yeah.
And then there are people who would say you should be on medication. And I will, in full disclosure, tell you my formal diagnosis came from my child psychiatrist. So if you want to be technical about it, because psychiatrists can evaluate you for ADHD, and I answered the questions. And then my mom, and I'd love to share my story because I'm going to weave what you do and
Yeah.
what I do together.
Yeah.
So I'll back up a little bit. My mom's clutter has been a source of conflict between the two of us since my early 20s, when I graduated from college and moved in with my mom. But the funny thing is, prior to that, when I was a child and an adolescent, my room looked like a bomb went off, and
Mhm.
I was always in trouble for it. It was constant battle, no matter what my mom threatened me with, grounded me. I couldn't get it together. But when I graduated from high school and moved into a dorm and then had my own apartment, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because I was living more closely with other people and I couldn't just shut the door, but I was able to sort of control my clutter. But my mom's clutter became such a source of contention between the two of us that I had to move out, because you probably know we all have different clutter tolerance levels, and some people it doesn't bother. But P.S., I didn't think anything of the ADHD thing either when I was diagnosed at 45. I'm a senior move manager, and I am a member of NASM, the National Association of Senior Move Managers. So I wanted to make sure you knew about that. And so I was just talking about downsizing and decluttering. And I will say that when you are challenged with it, it's a lot easier to identify with your audience than these people who, right. And by the way, for those of you who are listening and not watching, Dana is shaking her head. Anyway, so I didn't think anything of it until I heard a podcast where they were discussing fibromyalgia and migraine headaches being common with people with ADHD. And I called my mom and I said, "Hey, Mom, I think you might have ADHD." And all of these other clients who reminded me of my mother probably had it, but didn't get diagnosed, because our children, I wasn't diagnosed in school, but my kid was.
Right.
And so anyway, I just wanted you to have the backstory.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that, what you're talking about. I know for me, when I started writing and I started figuring out my house, the thing I realized was that my brain worked differently from the brains of naturally organized people, from the brains of most people who teach this stuff. Most people who talk about organizing talk about it because they enjoy it, because it's something that they're gifted in this area. And realizing that my brain was different was actually the freedom that I needed to not feel like a failure because traditional organizing advice didn't work for me, and instead to have the freedom to figure out what did work for me. Then in doing that, and in being honest, which was possible because I started out anonymously, right? Like I started out with kind of nobody knew who I was. So I was just putting it all out there. I wasn't teaching anything at the time. But because of that, sharing what my brain was, what I was thinking and what I was struggling with, then people said, "Oh, you have ADHD." And I have lots of thoughts. I was at the conference with a friend of mine, and we talked a lot about it over the weekend. And I'm not against at all, getting diagnosed. One of my kids was diagnosed. We went through the longer process because we really wanted to know the ins and outs. And so I'm very into diagnosis. But I feel like there's also a gateway a little bit that is kind of what I don't know. I don't know if this is right or wrong, right? But this is where my brain goes.
Right.
Is I feel like there is this gateway of, I just know something's wrong, right? Like I just know that it doesn't make any sense that I can be highly successful in this area and somehow not be able to keep my dishes done. Like that disconnect is kind of an entry point into understanding that your brain works differently. And I feel like I am that entry point for a lot of people into realizing I'm not the only one. Other people's brains work this way too. There is hope. And okay, then you kind of get into that world of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it all makes sense. And, because I felt like until I wrote my book and started talking about it, I thought I was the only one. And to your point, I started a business, but I've never balanced my checkbook in my entire life. And if you ask me to sit down and fill out like tax forms, I'm going to hyperventilate. Like I'm going to flood. And so I don't know if you saw the session at the conference, but it really hit home. And I don't remember who the person was, but she had a slideshow and she showed, it was like asynchronous. And I should really look it up, but it was one bicep that was heavily developed.
Yes.
You saw it. And then the other one that's just very weak and meager. And it was talking about how you could be so strong in this one area, like academically, and then maybe struggle socially. And it didn't, and one of the things I like to say is you meet one person with ADHD and you've met one person who has ADHD.
Yeah.
And we really all have our different strengths. But the reason that I suggested it to you is that every time I've had somebody on my podcast, their bios read like yours. It's like, she's done this and she's done this and she's done, it's like, wow, so much creativity and contribution. And the other thing, and I'm going to just ask you this question, like, do you ever think, wow, this is me. I've done all of this.
I have days when I do, and then I have a lot of days where I'm like, I haven't done anything. You know, I have never lacked for ideas at all. And those ideas tended to overwhelm me to the point of inaction so many times on I've got so many different options of things that interest me and things that I would enjoy doing. But yes, I'm very, with every accomplishment, I feel like it's building a foundation for me to be able to continue building. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but like I'm like it's like, hey, listen, it's nice to be a Wall Street Journal bestseller. I'm not a New York Times bestseller. I've sold more books than a lot of New York Times bestsellers, but I haven't sold them all in 1 week the way that you have to hit the New York Times, right? So like my book, Decluttering the Speed of Life, has sold 500,000 copies. And so like that's a huge accomplishment. It's the credibility that I think is the part of it that I appreciate the most, because when I can say that, then I'm able to say, so these things work, right? Like, because I don't know, sometimes the imposter syndrome that you were talking about before, right, is like to just say, hey, everybody, I have a system that works, you know? And so I'm really thankful I started the way that I did, because I would never in a million years have written about this subject. But I thought I was practicing writing. That's why it was anonymous. It was supposed to be temporary. I didn't feel any pressure to be great, because I was literally writing about my deepest, darkest secret, that my house was a disaster. But through that, people did start reading it. Nobody I knew, because I didn't tell them what I was doing, but people started reading it and giving me that this works, this helps, whatever. And so it gave me that I think would have been really hard for me to do without having started that way. I don't know if I hadn't started that way, I don't think I would be teaching this.
Right.
Because I think I would still be thinking, okay, I've figured it out, but I've basically just figured out what everybody else was born knowing.
Yes. And
Yeah,
so
like
I was gonna say, that's been for me, the biggest thing is finally going into people's homes as I was, you know, and realizing that other people were struggling with clutter the same way which, by the way, we would have not been invited into each other's homes.
Yes.
And that's a lot of the reason that social isolation, and keep in mind, my typical demographic is older adults. And so they were not, I had one of my favorite clients ever. And I would say that her clutter really bordered on hoarding in an unsafe way. And, you know, you can see variations of all of it, but her children had not been in her home for 10 years. And it wasn't until a crisis and a fall happened that they had to come into the house, and they were shocked at what had happened. But she didn't have anyone in her home. So here was this woman who was so social and so fun, and yet she was hiding this big secret. And
I get that. That was me. I mean, I hear things like she hadn't had anybody in her home for 10 years. And while I was not in that situation, I absolutely was living in a way that I was going to be in that situation at some point, right? Like I was amazingly gifted at finding reasons for people to not come over, you know? But when I did have people over, and I would always say, it's like, I can have people over. I just needed 2 weeks to get ready, a week to shove everything in the master bedroom. So, cause that was the door I could lock, and then a week to actually clean, because you can't clean when there's clutter everywhere. So I totally get that, right? Like I completely understand how that happens. I think with COVID, that has happened to more people than maybe it would have otherwise. Even my best friend, who does not struggle with clutter, she used to be somebody who had people in her home all the time. And she has said, she's like, just not doing that for 2 years has made her, it's just really hard to start having people over again. And for me, as someone who I'm like, if nobody's coming over, I don't even see the mess happening. So it is easy to fall into that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I could go on a whole different tangent with it, and how that changed so many people. And I actually lost what I was going to ask you.
Oh, sorry.
And no, it's not your fault. So that's actually part of ADHD. And now when I give a presentation, before I start, I'll say, you're going to see me lose my train of thought. You're going to see me lose my words. And I used to, mask that, and I would stop and pause and take a sip of water and say, does anybody have any questions? And then eventually it would come back to me. And so one of the things that I have loved about being so open about my ADHD and leaning into it is I'm not going to apologize, because I like to say this, but when I am me, you get to be you.
Yes.
And so now I remember what I was going to tell you. This is how it happens.
Yeah.
I used to invite people over because I needed the deadline to motivate me
Oh,
to get
absolutely.
something done. And then I started recently for Thanksgiving, we hosted. And I like to have really nice, clean counters when everybody comes, because I like it to look like I have it all together. And what I do, and still do, by the way, is I gather everything on the counter and I either put it in the shelf in the garage, or I stick it in the hall closet. This time I recorded, this is what I'm doing to get ready. And then what ends up happening is, you have to clean up all the dishes, and then you may or may not go back and get this. Plus, I found the fruit basket in my hall closet from probably like 2 weeks, had been there.
Only 2 weeks?
That's it. Yeah. The fruit flies hadn't come yet. But
Yeah.
isn't it? So I didn't realize that this many people struggled. And so kudos to you for figuring it out and changing lives. Because, by the way, I'm an ADHD coach, and we did a book club, and we read your book. So you
I'm
really,
glad.
yes. So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, we are going to take a pause, because when we come back, I want to ask you about your presentation. There were some really big points that you hit on. And what I also love is that you figured out these workarounds without even understanding ADHD. So it wasn't like you went out like I did and learned about ADHD and how these patterns happen. But and that's by the way, what a lot of people are saying now when they're asking me, why does it even matter? I've lived this many years, or they've lived this many years. I'm going to share that with you as well. I'm going to write it down because I think that's important. But I want to come back, and then I want, if you don't mind, sharing some of your big tips.
Sure.
And I'll tell you one that was really, really significant. So we're going to pause. And again, I am joined today, so fangirling over Dana K. White, who I really, really respect immensely. And I'm so glad you took the time to be on the podcast. But if you are enjoying this podcast, I hope that you will like and subscribe to it and share it with your friends. So we'll be right back. Okay. I used to dread visiting my mother. Because of the clutter, the piles, the chaos, we all experience clutter differently. For me, it was a source of anxiety and stress. I'd try to help, and she'd get defensive. We were both frustrated, and it was destroying our relationship. Then we discovered something that changed everything. My mother had ADHD, and she'd been living with it undiagnosed for over 76 years. Suddenly, it all made sense. The clutter wasn't laziness. The disorganization wasn't a choice. Her brain was wired differently, and no amount of willpower or traditional organizing advice was ever going to work. That discovery became my life's work. It's why I started the Grandma Has ADHD podcast. It's why I became an ADHD coach and specialist. And it's why I am so passionate about helping women like my mother, and maybe like you. Because here's what I know: clutter affects us emotionally and physically. It damages relationships, it creates shame spirals, and the overwhelm of not knowing where to start keeps you frozen. But it's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's brave. If you're in the San Diego or Coachella Valley area, my team at Silver Linings Transitions can come to your home. We'll help you tackle the clutter with compassion, not judgment. I also work with women virtually through one-on-one ADHD coaching. And if you are overwhelmed with clutter, I can connect you with trusted resources in your area. Visit jamishapiro.me to get started, or grab my book, This Explains So Much, on Amazon. My mother and I got our relationship back. You can get your peace back too. That's JAMISHAPIRO.me. Moving can feel overwhelming, whether you're downsizing, relocating, or helping a loved one transition. There are so many decisions to make, details to handle, and emotions to navigate. At Silver Linings Transitions, we believe every move should be magical, not stressful. We're more than movers. We expertly guide you through the entire process and do our best to alleviate your concerns. From the moment we meet, you'll feel comfortable because we will listen to your needs and wants and work together to create a personalized plan that honors your memories and your cherished belongings while helping you embrace your next chapter. We visit your new space and create a detailed floor plan, ensuring your furniture and treasured belongings will fit safely. We handle the logistics so you don't need to worry about anything, from sorting and packing to coordinating the sale and donation of unwanted items. Our professional team uses efficient, eco-friendly bins and handles every detail with care. We coordinate with our vetted moving partners, oversee the logistics, and ensure nothing is left behind, even packing your refrigerator items. Here's where the magic happens. We don't just unpack, we recreate the feeling of home. Using photos from your previous space, we thoughtfully arrange your furniture, hang your pictures, and set up your kitchen and bathroom so everything feels familiar from day one. When you walk into your new space, it's not just moved in, it's home. Your coffee pot is ready, your favorite photos are perfectly placed, your bed is made, and your new chapter begins with comfort and joy instead of chaos. This is how Silver Linings Transitions makes moves magical. We handle the emotional lifting and the logistics so you can focus on what matters most, settling into your new home. Because every move deserves a silver lining. Hi, I'm Jami Shapiro. I am an ADHD coach and the founder of Silver Linings Transitions, where we do home organizing and move management. And, I did not know that I had ADHD for years. And I remember personally hiring an organizing company to come in and help me because I could just never get it together. And it really wasn't until I understood ADHD and its impact that I realized why. And so I wrote a book, This Explains So Much, Understanding Undiagnosed ADHD, because I just feel like there's so many answers that people don't even know that they're looking for, especially generations of women who grew up thinking that ADHD was just for the hyperactive little boy. It turns out it's not only a body that can be hyperactive, but it can be a mind that's hyperactive. So you can have a wonderful day and you can have something wonderful happen, and then that one negative thing that happens is going to be the thing that takes you into that spiral, and it's going to be keeping you up at night, and you're going to be ruminating on it. And I think that, we as women carry so much shame and so much how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to have it together. And I remember that was the case for me. I remember, how is it that all of these women have so much consistency and their kids get the sticker charts and everything seems to run well, and I'm the one that's missing parent-teacher conferences and my house, is always in chaos. And then again, that negative self-talk. So my mission is really to educate people who have no idea that ADHD has the impact that it does. And it's to connect you to other people who get it and who will make you feel that you aren't alone, you're not crazy, you're not lazy, you're not stupid, you're not too much. You just have a brain that was wired differently. And I can't wait for you to join me in the community that I'm building, the workshops that I'm creating, the book club that I'm hosting, because I know that I am going to make a profound difference in your life. So we are back with Dana K. White, and I wanted to share one thing with you, but then I wanted to hear what you had to say. So one of the struggles with ADHD is too many choices. And that's actually one of the reasons that we can become so paralyzed, and it's decision paralysis. And so decluttering is one of the ultimate, decisions that you have to make. And the way that you shared your advice is actually something that I've learned that works for a lot of the areas that ADHD impacts us. So if you don't mind sharing, I mean, you know so much,
Yeah.
The highlights.
Okay. So are you talking about my process and how my first 3 steps of my no mess decluttering process, which the no mess decluttering process is one item at a time, final decision by final decision, and acting on that final decision so you don't ever end up with piles, right? Which is the reason a lot of people put off decluttering, is because they think that you have to pull everything out, make a bunch of piles, and then life happens or distractions happen or shutdown happens and you just leave it for a month or a year, whatever. Okay. So we don't ever make piles. But those first 3 steps of my process are all decision free. And it's because when you look at a pile or you open up a closet, you open up a cabinet that is packed full of stuff, you know that there are decisions in there. It feels like the entire pile is made up of hard decisions. And so the thought of expending that emotional energy to make all of those decisions is the reason that we shut down and
Yep.
don't get started.
Yes.
So because that's just too much. So
Mm-hmm.
the way to start is to identify the decision-free things that you can do. So the first step that I tell people to do is start with the trash. And when I say trash, I'm not talking about deciding that something's trash, because as someone who's highly creative, may or may not have ADHD, as we've been talking about, probably. But, I see the possibilities in everything. And so I have had the conversation many times over the years with someone who was trying to be helpful to me, of them wanting to argue with me over something being trash. And then I get very defensive and I'm like, it's not trash. So those are not the things that we're talking about. We're literally talking about, do you see anything that you personally already know is trash? By doing that, I am now looking at the individual items in the pile as opposed to the whole pile, which is overwhelming. Something
Mm-hmm.
starts happening in my brain because I now know what I'm dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer just blanketly being overwhelmed. My brain is adjusting, and in the background is more ready as I keep going to be able to deal with things. Okay. So I get out the trash. Trash is the easiest of the easy stuff because it goes straight in the trash or the recycling bin. And those things are right here with me. So I can
Mm-hmm.
make immediate progress without moving, without any decisions being made. This
Mm-hmm.
space is easier and less overwhelming with every item that leaves.
Mm-hmm.
Next step is to do the easy stuff, which I define as anything that I already know what to do with. Okay. I may not want to do that thing. I may not want to take those, dirty socks from when I, walked through the field and got mud on them and stuff. I may not want to go take those to the washing machine, but I already know that I need to do that. Okay. So easy is anything I know what to do. It's decision free, basically. Like, is there anything I can do without making a decision that I know would have to be done if I was ever to actually finish this pile or this closet, whatever space I'm working on? The
Mm-hmm.
third step is also decision free, and that's obvious donations. And I get into how to make decisions about what should stay and what should go and where it should be and all of that. But before we get to that, if there's anything in this space that is a duh donation, like it just makes me go, duh, of course that needs
Mm-hmm.
obvious donation, I'm going to get that out because I'm going to say 100% of the time, you're going to make more progress than you expect just doing the decision free steps. So starting with the decision free stuff is incredibly powerful in getting you going, which starts to build the momentum, seeing yourself make real progress. Because if you can see that visible progress, that is the best motivation to keep going ever. If you pull things out and make a bunch of piles, you're not seeing the progress. You're seeing it get worse,
Mm-hmm.
which then is what causes you to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So really seeing that visible progress, and you're clarifying so that now the only things that are left in there are the things that I am going to have to make decisions about. But it used to be a pile this big and now it's a pile this big.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole different thing in my brain to be facing that. And I'm ready to do that because of the success I've already experienced. Is that what you were talking about that you wanted me to say?
That was one, but
Okay.
that was great. That was great. And
Yes.
actually, definitely one of the problems or challenges with ADHD is getting started. And
Yep.
so one of the things that I tell people to do is do a 10-minute toss. And so just commit to setting your timer for 10 minutes, because you can do, go to the gym or do anything you don't want to do for 10 minutes. And so that's exactly what you've said, is like, let's just gain some momentum. And I love it. I wasn't thinking of that one, but I love it. And I had heard that one. And then if you didn't, like I've read, and if you don't know where it would go, then maybe you don't need it. That I've shared, that's yours.
Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
that's
Yes, that is how, yes, it plays out. So it's, if I
right.
needed this item, where would I look for it first?
Right.
If I don't have an answer to that, I need to admit to myself that I wouldn't go looking for it, which means it would just stay as clutter because I didn't even know it was in my house. And that's how I ended up rebuying so many things.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yes. You just said your words better than I did.
I have said them, I would guess, at least 100 times in the last month. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I really wanted to hit on is that when you have ADHD, like having that container of time. So for instance, the Pomodoro method. I don't know if you're familiar with the Pomodoro method. I'll read you there.
Vaguely.
So when you have something that you don't want to do, right?
Mhm.
Then what you do is you do something called the Pomodoro method, where you set your timer for 20, 25, 30, whatever you can
Okay.
bear. You take away any distraction, and then you decide what that reward is going to be when you finish the job. So
Okay.
that is a container of time. So that was one way to and then the other one that you suggested was the container. And I loved how you defined the container. And I think, so I would love, that was what I was kind of going with, but
Yeah.
everything is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So the container concept is, I would say, the number one communication problem between naturally organized people and naturally disorganized people like me, that the naturally organized people are trying to help, but are like, what are you not getting? The container concept is what we're not getting. Okay. I also, we talked before about how I got into doing this and writing about it. When I wasn't teaching anything, I was just like figuring things out and journaling what I was doing. I don't think I would teach the container concept if I hadn't been doing that as I discovered it, because it's so obvious once you hear it that it's like, how did I not know this? Right. And I think I would have thought, oh, this is what everybody else understands that I didn't. But because I was writing about it, people said, what? This changes everything. Okay. So that's the lead up to. The container concept is this. I used to think that containers were for putting things in. I thought that's why organized people loved containers. They would buy them, their house would look neat. I would buy them, the exact same ones that I saw the organized person using in their house, and I would bring them home, and my house did not look like theirs. In fact, mine looked horrible, right? So let's say that my friend has this craft shelf for her kids, and she's got a red, and it's cute and it's adorable and it makes the kids actually want to craft, and I'm jealous of it. And I think, what's the difference between her craft shelf and my craft closet at home that's completely packed to the point where we're scared to open it because everything will fall out, so we don't actually do any crafts, right? She has a red bucket with the crayons in it. And so I thought, that's the difference. I'm going to get the red bucket. And so I bring the red bucket home, and I go to put my crayons in that red bucket, same size as hers. And I fill it completely, and I still have 700 crayons left over. And I think, why does this not work for me the way that it works for her? And so I go and I buy 2 more red buckets, because logically, that's what makes sense to me. And then I bring the 3 red buckets home. I fill them completely. I go to put them on the shelf, and they don't fit on the shelf. And I think, why is this so hard? And so I buy another shelf. And then the shelf, eventually, I don't have enough space in my room for more shelves. And I think that this is where my brain used to go. I think I need a new house. I felt like I was doomed to be disorganized because I didn't have the space, even though my friend had a significantly smaller house than I did. But I wasn't understanding what was different about how we were doing things. And as I was working one day, because I talk to myself a lot, I was saying the word container, and it just hit me that the inside of the word container is the word contain. like firefighters work to contain a fire, they create a boundary, they create a limit. And if they can keep the fire inside the boundary, they can keep it under control. If it goes outside the boundary, bad things happen. And when it hit me that the purpose of a container is not to hold things, it's to serve as a boundary, as a limit. That was when I realized, oh, I have been doing this incorrectly. So I take the same situation and I have a red bucket or whatever, right? Any space. And I look at that pile of 1,000 crayons and I pick my favorite crayons first and I put them in the red bucket. That's actually a fun process to put my favorite ones in first. And then something happens in my brain when I see that the red bucket is full that makes me go, oh, I guess I don't need 1,000 crayons. But it's the bucket, the facts of the space telling me that, not my friend or my mom saying, why do you need 1,000 crayons? Right? Like I train decluttering coaches to help people through my process. And the number one lesson is don't ask people why they have stuff, because I had reasons for all of the things that I had. And it's not a helpful question that actually moves you forward. But pointing out that this is the space is outside of me and it limits that argument. And I'm not going to argue with the red bucket. Now, I can want to buy more red buckets, but then the shelf takes care of that because the size of the shelf is the size of the shelf. The size of the room is the size of the room. Every physical space is a natural limit. And when I realized that the purpose of a container was to serve as a limit, it helped me see that was why my house was out of control. I had more stuff than could fit functionally in my space. And if I try to keep more stuff than I have space for, there is no hope of my space ever being under control. And so something about realizing that changed everything in my home and has changed everything for so many people. When we say, I'm going to accept the reality, the limits of this space, and let the space make the hard decisions. So I don't have to say, is this a good crayon? All crayons are good. Just peel off the paper and you can still use them till they're down to nothing, right? But if I keep every single thing that has any value whatsoever in my home, then those things lose value because I can't find them. I don't have any room to use them. I'm overwhelmed. I shut down because I have so much stuff. So instead I say, this is the space that I have. Does this crayon deserve space in there more than another crayon? Because something has to go because the space is the size that it is.
I love it. And I want to give you, just because it's going to be there for me unless I do, I want to give you the reasons behind why you didn't want to let go of the other crayons from an ADHD perspective. One is that there's this, oh, I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to do this project. I'm going to melt. And I have done it, once where I melted the crayons into the little, thing. And so I'm going to use it one day. And that's very much an ADHD thing. We also have a very strong sense of social justice. And so other people have no problem throwing something into the landfill or the garbage, but somebody with ADHD is like, no, that's not the right thing to do. So that does make it harder to let go of things. I'll share with you, for me, the two things that have helped me the most are not having a lid on a bin so that I don't have to then, because that's one more step that I'm going to have to do.
That's good.
And then I love, and I've heard some people don't like it, but I love a label maker because then I have to be very intentional about, and it also helps me remember what it is I have, because one of the things we struggle with is out of sight, out of mind. And so I don't know about you, but have you ever hidden something away that you needed to find, or like I took something from my kid that they were misbehaving and I wanted them, and then I couldn't remember where I hid it? Did you ever go through that?
Oh, absolutely. Which is the reason my decluttering question that I use on literally every single thing in my home is, if I needed this, where would I look for it first? That is not me having to remember or think of the best place. It is literally, oh no, where is it? What's the first drawer that I would open? And then I put it in that place. And then I don't have to remember. I don't have to remember exactly what I have or exactly what it is. In the moment where I go, where is that pen? I'm like, I don't know, but I go and I look and it's in the place where I look for it. So that's my way to combat the thing with the labels. I think labels are very helpful for a lot of people. And if they help you, you should absolutely do it. I will say, because I generally like my target person to whom I'm speaking, I mean, I'm glad that it helps everybody, but my target person is the person who has a lot more stuff than could possibly ever fit in their home functionally. There's a lot of decluttering to do before you pull out a label maker,
I
because
hear you.
what I used to do when I thought that labels were the answer, because it made sense, right? Like, okay, then I'll know where everything is. I would start with all my stuff and I would have all these bizarre labels. And okay, this shelf is going to have 15 different things. So am I supposed to have like 15 different labels? Like, so the first thing to do is get out the trash, because you don't need to be labeling the trash, right? The
No. And
next,
by the
right.
way, I tell people
Yeah.
declutter first. I'm talking about
No, I get it. I
how
absolutely get it.
what
Yeah.
helps my brain
Yeah.
is to remember
Well,
that I need to
and I
label.
think that's actually a really important thing to talk about too. Like you said, like, yes, we're saying the same thing here, right? Like we're saying the same thing. Absolutely declutter first. But I think for the person who doesn't understand the realities of the limitations of space, like the container concept, that's where I was. And I'm just going to say, and you would know the actual statistics, but I do believe people with ADHD generally have very high intelligence, right? And a lot of high capability in so many areas that maybe other people don't have that capability. So you're used to kind of being a very capable, intelligent
Mhm,
person.
mhm.
And so the idea of labels is like, yes, that is it, right? Like, that is it. I get it. I'm going to be able to do that. And we've kind of forgotten what the space actually looks like until we then go open it up, and then we shut down because we're like, the labels is where I want to get. This is where I am right now. How in the world am I ever going to do that? I'm shutting down and not doing anything. Right. And so I think that's where, as I always say, I don't teach organizing.
Mhm.
I only teach decluttering, because that is the actual thing that needs to be done. And I used to think decluttering and organizing were the same thing, and you just kind of did them together. And that was the reason I couldn't make any progress. When I realized they were separate things, and
Mhm.
when I gave myself permission to just declutter,
Mhm.
immediately my space was more organized, just because I had less stuff in it. So anyway, I always like to point that out, because I know somebody's listening who's like, labels, that's it.
Yeah, no,
And
I'm
yeah,
so glad that you
yeah.
did, because you are right. And I always tell people, because I talk about downsizing, right sizing,
Mhm.
cluttering, organizing, and what's the difference. And I don't like the word downsizing. I think, right sizing. And that's
Well,
really where
that's great.
I'm at, because we should be identifying what's right for our life. And then downsizing has a negative connotation. But oh, gosh, I lost it again. And it was,
You're good. You're good.
I know it was, yeah.
We were talking about, oh no, I've forgotten. You know what? Here's what I always say. When I do that, and it happens all the time in interviews, I'll be like, I was going to say something and it was going to change your life. And now I can't remember what it was. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, that is what it was. So we were talking about the labels and I remember what it was.
Okay, go.
This is my unofficial poll, and I'm
Mhm,
asking you this because I'm very curious about the boundaries in the space. When you cook dinner
mhm,
and you have leftovers, do
mhm.
you have an easy time judging the size that the Tupperware container should be to fit food? No. Okay. So when I remember to ask this question, I'm discovering that a lot of people who possibly have ADHD struggle with that spatial.
Yeah.
So, for instance, my company, we are a senior move management company. The majority of what we do is senior move management. We do help other people move, but I remember I was training an employee on packing, and I know how to pack a box so that things don't break, but I don't know how to pack a box so that's efficiently like Tetris
Mm,
packed,
mhm.
right? And that was when I first realized, oh, I don't see space the same way. So when I would go onto a job, to your point, I don't do any of the organizing. I might have unpacked everything and gotten it out of the paper, but I did not organize it and put it, because my brain doesn't work that way. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And I just want to assure people that it's 17 years in, and I would say 6 or 7 years in of decluttering, and I was like, "Wait, I don't need to organize. This is organized." Like, it's organized just to have less stuff. And I'm like, "Okay, good. Then I don't need to worry." And it took so much pressure off, cuz I thought I wanted the color-coded system and the perfect pantry and all that kind of stuff. And I realized I actually just want a pantry that it's easy to see what I have and grab what I need and put back what I am done with. I mean, like, that's all I wanted. I just want my house to not hold me back so I can go do the fun things that I want to do.
Well, and also to your point, when you can't find what you need, that raises your cortisol level. Like
Mhm,
and so also cortisol is a stress hormone, and
mhm.
there's so many so there's also a reason to decluttering simply for, to your point, not, and I always say this in my presentations, not everyone is meant to live in a Pottery Barn catalog. We all,
Mm-mm.
again, we all have our different clutter tolerances, but at least my definition of organizing is knowing what you have and knowing where it is when you need it. Actually, put that in.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have the pottery, but I would love to. I'll be honest with you. I would love to, but I've also stopped beating myself up for the fact that it isn't going to happen, because how many people can host a podcast or get on stage and speak to people or write a book, right?
Well,
So
yeah, I call it my clutter threshold. So what I mean by that is sometimes people think, like you talked about clutter tolerance before. That's actually not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is clutter threshold is the amount of stuff that you personally can easily keep under control. So it's the difference between the person who has the Pottery Barn catalog home. Like my friend Jackie, she makes these great little displays of all these cute items, and she's the type of person who walks into the room and sees when one of them got a little bit off and goes and fixes it, right? I can set up a display like that. I do not have the personality to ever think about it again until somebody rings the doorbell and I realize it's all tumbled into a pile. Like your clutter threshold is the reason why you can have the exact same items in the exact same space as someone else. Theirs looks like the Pottery Barn catalog and yours looks like a thrift store. And so acknowledging and accepting that even though my mother passed down the idea that I should have everything I ever need for any situation, especially if I could get it on sale, right, or free,
uh-huh.
then she passed down that thought, but she didn't pass down the part of her that allows her to keep all of that under control. She
Mhm.
can have lots of things. She can have a cabinet packed in a very detailed, packed way, and need something, remember that it's back there, move 5 things, get it out, put those 5 things back. I go, where's that thing? And I start tearing apart the house, or maybe
Mhm.
I move those 5 things and then I don't think to put them back until, 3 weeks later, whatever.
Right.
So I just need to have less stuff.
I love that you use clutter threshold. When I say clutter tolerance, I mean like when you live, and I get this a lot. Well, people will come up to me and they have a spouse that is driving them crazy because they have
Mhm,
too much stuff, and it can really cause a toll on a
mhm.
relationship.
Yep.
And that's what I mean, that we have different clutter tolerance levels. Like my mom's clutter tolerance or threshold was higher than mine, and it caused and I wasn't married to my mom. I was an adult. I could
Yeah.
go and get an apartment, but what do
Yeah.
we do when we have
Yeah.
mismatched clutter thresholds and tolerance? But you have been amazing. Is there first of all, Dana K. White is everywhere. So what's the best way for people to find you?
You can just go to danakWhite.com. That will take you to my website, which is still called A Slob Comes Clean, which is that secret anonymous blog that I started in 2009. But that has all my places. I do a YouTube video on Thursdays. I have podcasts that come out on Thursdays, and I also do live Q&As on YouTube every Tuesday, and people can ask questions at those. But I definitely always say that the best thing to do is to read Decluttering at the Speed of Life, because it brings it all together in a process. Like, so my 5-step process, you learn that process and you learn how to apply it to the different areas in your home and helping the people in your life and all that. And it's available at most libraries as well. So
Mhm.
if
That
money's an issue.
that is, well,
Yeah.
500,000 people have had their lives changed, they have ADHD and it's still sitting on a shelf and something they want to do one day and they haven't
Right.
gotten
Right. Well, and I hear from so many people who are like, I have it in all the formats. I have it on Kindle. I have it. So they all, they have it in audio and Kindle and paperback. And I'm like, it's fine with me. Sounds great. Putting
nice.
my kids through college. So
Good, good.
yeah.
Well, is there
Yeah.
anything that you didn't get to share that you wish that you had?
I don't think so. You did a great job. You're a good interviewer. This
Well, I
was fun.
appreciate that. And that I take that as a big compliment given your how many places you've been. Well, I always like to end my podcast, Dana, with a lot of the people who are listening are later in life discovering ADHD, and that is often met with the grief and the relief. You've definitely figured out how to make life work for you, but there are a lot of people who do struggle, and I always like to use my mom as the avatar. So my mom's super bright. Did not finish college and could never focus on classes to finish her degree, changed jobs frequently, and is probably looking at her life with a lot of not probably is looking at her life with a lot of regret. So my mission is to help people understand themselves better. And that's why it matters. So when you understand that there was never anything wrong with you, that you have a brain that was wired differently, you have a brain that's interest based, when you lean into what your strengths are and stop beating yourself up for everything you could have or should have done, and also repairing relationships, because a lot of people with ADHD struggle with rejection sensitivity, and they can overreact and they can cause issues and blow things up. And that's what happened with my mom and I. We actually didn't have a good relationship for many years, and because we now understand the impact of ADHD, we've repaired our relationship, and I want that for other people. So anyway, I am so grateful that you said yes and were on my podcast, and this was amazing. And for those of you who are listening, it is never too late to make the rest of your life the best of your life. Thanks for tuning in. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.